With announcement of a new restriction list in the coming weeks, of course this channel is going to look at a discussion video in regards to what could be on that next list. And while you can simply state which cards are broken from experience, I'm going to look at this from a more quantitative approach, utilizing some event data. Courtesy of Egman, the Egman events page houses a large repository of data available for all content creators to view. From this, you can pick up representation and overall deck profiles. If you're an up-and-coming content creator yourself, do consider checking out this page for data. Simultaneously, there's also data available from digimonmeta.com, and this highlights events from the East. That being said, I'll mainly pull from the Eggman's website because I can pick up a broader range data of the top 16 versus just first and second place. In total, I collected 12 events, mainly focusing on regionals that were outside of the region of Asia. Although not consistent, some events had top 16s, while others had only top 8s, yielding a total of 176 deck profiles that topped. Of those 176 deck profiles, this was broken down into 36 various categories, and then recorded based on placement. Keep in mind the most recent Gen Con event, which was BT22 Legal, was excluded. Looking at the top 5 decks that placed consistently based on representation, Megidramon, Royal Knights, and Guilmon related decks took the top 3 spots. In 4th place we had Sakuyamon, and then after that it was a tie between Blue-Green Imperial Dramon and Purple Hybrid. But remember, restriction lists can sometimes be late to the party, as we've seen with restriction to cards like Mirage Galgamon, and oddly the Stingmon from the starter deck. For the remainder of the video, I'll be looking at several categories before ultimately placing them into one of several of them. These categories are as follows: banned, maybe banned restricted, restricted, maybe restricted no restriction, and lastly, no restriction. Interestingly, the first thing that I want to point out is that the top 3 decks in regards to representation have overlaps in key cards like BT13 Gallantmon and the promo Gallantmon. However, do I realistically see any restrictions to these cards? The answer is honestly no, because for Royal Knight related decks, the problem is somewhere else. But when you look at Megidramon and Gallantmon X decks, we have quite a few cards to discuss here. The big card up on everyone's bingo card for the restriction list is Gravity Crush. And while Gravity Crush was introduced way back in Special Booster 1.0, this card costs 0 memory, gains you 2 memory, but gives your opponent an extra 2 memory when the turn passes over. And while this doesn't have a security effect, the benefits of being able to OTK your opponent through various means makes it much more deadly when that memory return won't matter. And while this card isn't comparable to cards like Hammer Spark or Jack Raid, honestly the closest card with similar effects was Blinding Ray. And considering all 3 of these cards have been hit to 1 at this point, it's very likely that Parabolic Junk and this card will join soon enough. But you know what are some of the big cards to consider for possible restrictions? This is where the community is divided on a secondary hit to the deck. On one hand, you could hit the level 3 Guilmon that has Rush. On the other hand, you can target the Greymon X. With Guilmon, this takes away multiple Rush bodies that can spawn out after Megidramon is deleted. On the other hand, Greymon X will prevent you from doing that exact same thing, but helps facilitate draw and also gain memory when any of your opponent's Digimon are deleted. Inheritable aside, the when Digivolving effect is what really kicks this Digimon into overdrive. Needless to say, I'm of the opinion that Greymon X gets the limit because Greymon X, Garurumon X, and Numamon X are the other level 4 X antibody offenders. And with 2 cards, or maybe 3 cards even hit so far, realistically how many cards should or would we expect for the up-and-coming list? Well, with the Royal Knights as standalone cards, hitting omekamon from BT20 feels like the right choice because it cheats into Omnimon X. Though to be fair, King Drasteel prevents Digivolution on your turn, which makes sense. Only downside is, this is a huge tempo swing, and with Last Guardian and Royal Knights of the Purge, it just feels a bit much. Royal Knights of the Purge feels like another option, but honestly, Royal Knights is a toss-up for me on what they'll hit. As for Sakuyamon, there's a lot of option cards to choose from, but ultimately I think many players agree that if you were to hit an option card, it has to be the Digivolution plugin S. A shame to see it go, but in some ways, I'm reminded of hidden potential discovered. So to summarize where we're at so far, we have Gravity Crush, Greymon X or Rush Guilmon, Royal Knights of the Purge, and Digivolution plugin S. But now the next question, what else could possibly get hit, or better yet, unrestricted? Looking at what's left, Imperial Dramon and Purple Hybrid were still decent meta contenders, but for me, I don't think they need any additional hits because of their representation being average, or slightly above average. With 36 different decks on a list of 176 possible options, this would mean that if a deck has an average of approximately 5 occurrences, it'd be average. And at 9 occurrences for these 2 decks, is that much of an issue? Because the meta continues to grow faster and faster, I still feel like starter deck Greymon has overstayed its welcome at this point for the OTK. And with the fact that Bandai constantly prints Greymon support cards, I also feel like the level 4 specifically deserves the hit because you can get it elsewhere through another Greymon named Digimon. The downside here is, a level 4 with this type of inheritable has always been strong, and combo this with the fact that you can devote your level 5 for that piercing inheritable, I just feel like this is one element of the game design that needs to be changed. True, Greymon decks don't top, but certain cards just need to go after a certain time period. Remember Hammerspark? I don't think many players saw that coming. Some players argue and contend that Parabolic Junk is another card that should get the restriction, but this is also only because it has similar status to memory gaining option cards that cost 0. But with such a large card pool in Digimon card game, honestly, I don't foresee any additional restrictions, well, maybe one more. Sayo & Co. has been around long enough at this point that we've seen multiple iterations of loop that enables players to pull back the memory on their opponent's turn. And while the choice restriction was valid at the time, ultimately I feel that this card either needs to go to 1 or none at this point to never deal with this problem again. At 1, it's honestly valid that if you get hit with a loop, you kinda deserve it. I felt the same with Matt Ishida from BT2, but Bandai just went ahead and removed it entirely. For Unrestrictions, there's a small list of cards that have been on here forever. Reasonably, with how a lot of decks are today, when it comes to speed, removal, and more, I don't see a reason why some of these should be on the list much longer, but at the same time, there is justification. After you remove the top 4 decks of problem makers, now you have to ask, what cards can be abused in others? And with Greymon X being on a lot of people's minds, I still don't think that this card should ever come off the list because of the amount of dual-colored Metal Greymons or Rise Greymons that now exist in which you could get to EVO for 1. It just overtunes Greymon decks in general. Likewise, until something is done about the dog engine, reintroducing Garurumon X would be another issue that's just asking for problems. But some of the big ones I'm looking at are Jet Sylphimon, Promo Grankuwagamon, and Promo weregarurumon. These 3 cards were problematic cards in their time, but in order. There's not been any yellow vaccine decks for a long time, and even looking at this specific list, there's only one deck that could remotely utilize Jet Sylphimon, which is Ancient Garurumon. And although the recovery has no conditions attached to it, we have a lot of security trashing and promotion of Bandai's thought process of keeping games aggro and fast. And because we're keeping games aggro and fast, decks like Grankuwagamon and Melga X honestly could use these cards back at 4 to be aggro. The funny thing is, with Blasted Evolution, these decks are highly susceptible to many effects that you could run into, like D-Evolve and DP Reduction that just kill your combo. And while yes, this is a promotion of the raised meta again, did we ever leave it when certain decks do that while simultaneously controlling the board? Cross-art decks also did top, which honestly leads me to the idea of, should Cross 4 be unrestricted? At this time, with better retrains of its individual components, I kinda wanna leave it at 1 still. But it's not often that Bandai does unrestrict cards, and for that matter, will Bandai at some point move past the 1 or none rule and give us semi-restrictions with 2 copies? Ultimately, as always, this video is just a speculation of what I think Bandai might be up to in regards to restrictions, though the Greymon from the first starter deck is a personal restriction I think that is something that's keeping Bandai from making Greymon remotely great again. What are your thoughts on some of these choices, and which ones do you agree with, disagree with, and why? Keep discussion in the comments civil, and I'll catch you on more content this week. This is DIGI-PANDA, logging out.